Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, on this sunny Queensland afternoon, I have the honour of being joined by Luke Png, South Australian born, wine enthusiast, sports enthusiast, all-round great guy, as I trust we will share and demonstrate throughout the course of this interview. Luke, how are you doing?
Good, thanks, mate. How are you?
Good. Look, it's humid. It's warm. I think that winter is gone as opposed to winter is coming. And summer is upon us. And, you know, it's such is life. But I'm enjoying a glass of white wine and I'm sitting down and I get to talk to yourself. And so that makes it a little more bearable, I think. All things aside.
I'll try and do my best for you. I probably should have bought a beer or a glass of wine in myself, but I've got a game of touch that I need to get to after this. So
wow, you're on the clock.
Yeah, in a certain sense, I guess. It is recreational, so I should clear that up.
The funnest kind. How often do you play touch?
I haven't played in quite a while, simply because I've been playing AFL football with my local footy club, the Parkridge Pirates. Since our season has concluded, it's given me the opportunity to get back into some touch with some fellow Catholics. So if there's anyone out there that's listening and would be interested in joining, feel free to let me know.
How awesome is that? But before we get into the really, really deep things, let's just talk about you. And you've got a love of sport. You were in the Army Reserves. Fun fact is that you played on a team that beat the Spanish national football team in Aussie rules. Can you tell me about that? There's a lot that I think could be unpacked. That sort of confuses me a little. There is a Spanish team.
Yeah, look, suffice to say, a lot of mayo has been thrown onto that.
Mate, that's what it's for.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, I went over to London, and I suspect that will probably come up in later on in this interview. But when I was over there, one of my old friends from primary school actually invited me to come out and play for a club called the North London Lions. Got involved. It was great. And then on one of their pre-season trips, we were able to get in contact with some expats and some fellow locals that were really passionate about AFL. And basically, we were able to play their national team, in which we won. However, I suffered a pretty bad ankle injury in that game, which pretty much meant that I couldn't work for the next 2 months. And on top of that, I wasn't able to play. So I was pretty devastated. But thanks to some great support from one of your regular people on the show here, Tam, and a few of the Catholics over there, I was able to get through it, and it's been great.
How good is that? How long have you been? So I think you just answered the question. You've got a bit of a history when it comes to the great game of Aussie rules.
A little bit. So, actually, I could probably go back to my grandfather. He played for pre-AFL days, I should add. He played in the SANFL, so that's the South Australian National Football League. He was playing for a club called Norwood. If you're from South Australia or an above average fan of AFL, you would have heard of them. And he was known as a pretty hard individual. I think that would be fair to say. I'm very lucky to have some pieces of memorabilia from his playing days. From there, I even from a young age, I was quite keen on footy. Unfortunately for me, though, my mum and my dad were not, given the rough nature of the game and the high chance of injury. They steered me into tennis, which I enjoyed.
It's a great game, tennis. Good.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm not as good as as I'd like to be, and my patience as an individual, especially practically in those early years, was not suited to the game of tennis. So eventually got involved into a footy club that my uncle used to play for in Adelaide, Edwardstown Football Club, and from there, just started playing, really enjoying it, and
Okay. And the footy you play these days for the Parkridge Pirates, recreational, relaxed, casual, or are you a hard baller?
Um, Hardballer, but understanding that it is local footy. So look, I do like to think that I'm a relatively competitive person. I don't like to lose. We have had a rough couple of years down at Parkridge Pirates due to multiple reasons, COVID being one of them. I think that's sort of impacted everyone's lives, obviously, but at large, the community as well.
Mm-hmm.
I do play with some other fellow Catholics on that team, and it's been great to be playing with them and just sort of being there for them in a certain sort of capacity, because I do know that footy clubs can be pretty rough places at the best of times, and I just wanted to, in so much as I could, just be there for those guys and just let them know that you don't have to get involved with everything that comes with the social aspect of footy clubs and still be like a well-regarded and appreciated player within the club.
Mm-hmm. Good on you. I know you've traveled somewhat sort of extensively, and I think we'll have more time to sort of touch on that throughout your story. We'll try and sort of sew that into there. But you're South Oz born. And with that, the first thing, ding, that sort of comes into my mind, I've got a one-track mind when it sort of comes to things South Australia. I think of wine. I think of, Barossa, McLaren Vale. Your family's got a bit of a connection, I understand, in the wine world, but that's not actually a South Australian connection. If I was to say Blue Pyrenees, can you tell me a little bit about that?
So
I've got a nice bottle of Chardonnay on the shelf. The Blue Pyrenees.
Oh, yeah. Oh, do you? Was that a recommendation from someone? Or?
No, which was quite funny because I didn't know about the connection. I've, had a pretty good relationship with Blue Pyrenees, as did my late father. And somebody saw it on the shelf when they were over and said, "Oh, did you know so-and-so?" Because I knew of you. I remembered you from, a long time ago. And they said, "Oh, so-and-so is associated with Blue Pyrenees." And I said, "No way. Lodging that up here for a later date."
So my uncle, he's a winemaker, and he landed himself a job at Blue Pyrenees as the head winemaker, and went on to become the CEO of that particular winery. In recent times, both he and the new owner of that winery have decided to part ways. Read into that as much as you like. Coming from a completely unbiased perspective, Blue Pyrenees has probably only got about 2 to 3 years of good wine left in them since my uncle's left. So, but if you do get the opportunity to, I highly recommend their Shirazes. If you can get your mitts on the Section 1 or their estate blend, they are just incredible drops that are almost to die for.
Okay. Can I ask about the estate blend? What is the estate blend?
The estate blend is mostly made up of Shiraz, and then I think it's got a mixture of Pinot Noir and Merlot in it. It did win quite a number of awards, so I'm not being unbiased when I say that. The facts are out there. Fortunately for me, when I got married, I was able to get quite a large quantity of Blue Pyrenees wine. As I'm sure if you've drunk some of it, I'm sure you're aware that my uncle likes to pack a little bit of extra alcohol into those drops. So there was a few people that had a couple of glasses and went, "Whoa, that's a little bit more than I was expecting." And but it led to a great night had by all, from what I understand. So fantastic to have that there.
Yeah, good. Because the Victorians are punching in terms of the quality of the wine they're producing. Yarra Yearing just churned out wine of the year, I think, for James Halliday, and that was a blend. So I don't know. You've sounded the death knell for Blue Pyrenees, which is unfortunate. I thought maybe they can respond with a counter blend. But
you're going to have to talk to someone else. That being said, Victoria has its regions that are doing quite well. Obviously, lesser known within, I guess, the greater population that they actually have a wine industry there, but it does quite well for itself. The conditions there are unique in terms of not being like the Hunter Valley in New South Wales and not being like the Barossa or the McLaren Vale regions in South Australia. So, they've carved out a good niche there for themselves and they're making the most of it. But I think South Australia will very quickly reclaim some sort of title on that front.
Yeah, okay. Last question in relation to this, just because it's something I'm interested and passionate about. What do you like drinking? You're a big fruity man or sort of a lighter, more delicate?
Ooh.
What's your
really
going?
depends on what I'm eating and what I'm kind of in the mood for, I guess.
Yep.
My go-to though would be a good punchy Shiraz.
Okay.
Whether that be fruity, spicy, or even earthy, I'm happy if it's a good drop. If it's not such a great drop, not so great.
Yep.
I'm not above throwing some down the sink if it's that bad.
Yeah. Gotcha. Terrific. All right. The story of Luke Png. So, cradle Catholic, born a Catholic.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So, as far as I can remember, my mum took me to mass on Sundays. We prayed the rosary every night as a child. Obviously, growing up in South Australia, though, there is not a large traditional Catholic community in that area. So I didn't really have anyone sort of in my age group. I didn't really have any peers. It was just kind of, this is how it is. Learnt my catechism, was able to, obviously receive my first communion. I was also able to be confirmed in some of my travels and sort of continue on from there. My grandparents, very strong, fervent Catholics as well. Anyone that knows them just thinks of Catholic. I think that's the best way to describe it. Even some of my relatives that have fallen away from the faith, they just, them and Catholicism is very much synonymous.
Yep. Your parents' background. So both sides?
Yeah.
Yep.
No. So my dad was not a believer. He did not practice either. Eventually did convert. Unfortunately, he's moved away from his faith. I suspect, and I'm happy to be corrected on this. I suspect that maybe he did it to sort of appease my mum a little bit. Whatever his intentions were, I can't really speak on behalf of the man, but there was a conversion there at some point. How fervent and genuine, I couldn't tell you.
Yep. And what were your early experiences with Catholicism? Because I think what's somewhat typical, especially with traditional, cradle traditional Catholics, you only realize how unique it is to be traditional Catholic the moment that you hit that stage where you actually see what's going on in the world outside of you. And it's not something that you think an awful lot about in your early infancy. That was my experience anyway. What about yours?
I think the realization for me came a lot sooner.
Right.
Pretty much as soon as I got to school. So when in Adelaide, I went to a Protestant school called Our Saviour Lutheran School. It was, a decision that my mum made. There were reasons behind that, but as soon as I arrived at the school, I understood that they believed in Jesus and sort of had their version or their story of Jesus. But I also knew that it was going to be very different to what I'd been taught in certain aspects.
Yep.
Given the fact that all of my peers in my class were, for the most part at the time, I guess, they went to church on Sundays, very much in each other's circles. They kind of knew each other from outside. I was very much a sort of outsider, and as part of going there, not that I participated, but they'd have these sort of worship sessions, I guess, inside the big church that was associated with the school, where they didn't do communion or anything like that, but it was you got there, you sung some songs, read some Bible verses, and obviously that, in comparison to the traditional Latin Mass, is chalk and cheese, to say the least. So from a very early stage, I knew that my faith was different, and that the way we practiced it was definitely different as well. As time went on, obviously people found out that I was Catholic, and they sort of started accusing me of interesting things like praying to statues, thinking that Mary was, somehow better or on par with Jesus. And it was like, hang on a second, no. And because I hadn't had like I learned the catechism, but it was like, here's the question, here's the answer, and that's how it is. No one really explained to me, here are the reasons why the catechism states X, Y, and Z, for example. So it was really hard for me to articulate or argue my points and what I believed. And most of the time I just sort of ignore the questions and sort of get on with life and go from there.
And a lot of the time, at least in my experience anyway, you're only caused to think about things like that the minute somebody attacks you. So you read the academic answer in a book and you go, okay, I think I understand what that means, and blah, 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 blah. But then somebody actually goes at you on a point, and you're forced to actually try and process what it was that you read previously. And sometimes that can be messy. But over time, that's I guess that the practical application of the theory that you sort of need.
Exactly.
To develop on that front.
In a certain sort of sense, I feel much more well equipped now to answer their questions. But you have to understand that there's some significant hurdles when it comes to that sort of stuff as well, because whilst their hearts may be in the right sort of setting or motivation, I guess, they are coming at the Bible fundamentally different to us, and they've also they're reading a different Bible really at the end of the day.
It's just very difficult.
Books
when there's no common ground, you go, how do we have any sort of meaningful conversation?
Exactly.
You have to go back and back and back and back.
You really do, and that's something that I'm trying to do at the moment. But that being said, you've got to find that common ground with people, whether they be brothers in Christ, as Protestants are with us, or whether it be an ardent atheist. You've got to go, okay, all right, so what's something that we have in common and can build that building block from? So, for example, Protestants have a very deep love and respect for the Bible, and that's definitely something that you can work with, along with a deep love and respect for Jesus, Christ our King. So there is definitely room to work with, but don't go into it half-baked or half-cocked or anything like that, because it will blow up in your face, and definitely approach it with a spirit of charity as well, and understanding. And understand that through no fault of these individuals, they may have been misled for whatever reasons, may have been misled even with the best of intentions. But it's always good to make sure you try and keep those communication channels open with anyone that you encounter, I guess.
Yep. Going back to your early days, were concepts like religion and God just at a very fundamental level things you were naturally comfortable with and things that made sense to you? Or was that something that you had to confront as you grew older?
All of that stuff came naturally to me, I guess, because I could see it, and I could see the evidence for it, anecdotally speaking, I guess, and reason it out quite easily. So for me, that particular hurdle wasn't quite so much. As time went on, I think I kind of just got sick of being on my own in a certain sort of context. So unlike some of the bigger traditional Catholic communities, whilst we did go and travel into some of these bigger communities, I didn't necessarily feel exactly like I fit in per se, because in a certain sort of sense, I was, and still am to a certain extent, very worldly. Something that I am trying to work on as much as I can. But I think that I probably was exposed more to the world than your average cradle Catholic, traditional Catholic within these communities. So I struggled to fit in there as well. So as time went on, I just sort of very selfishly, from a spiritual sort of point of view, just wanted to do me as such. And I did walk away from my faith there for quite a number of years. I didn't stop believing in God, though. I wouldn't say. I think it was more of a case of I got tired of all the rules and regulations and all the things that I could do and couldn't do, or had to do, and sort of left from there.
Yep.
I might leave you open for another question on that one.
Well, that is so interesting, and they're the things I love talking about, because you're not the first to have done that. You're not the last, and what we're talking, you're not the last who probably will do that. And what we're talking about are, struggles, and that's, to my mind, one of the things that makes the Catholic Church so beautiful, is because it is so upfront about personal struggling and suffering, and it really embraces that. Sure, it has rules and regulations, etc. But hey, we're all sinners. And so in terms of you, you identified the things that caused you to walk away. What was it like once you'd walked away? Because you've come back, and I don't know how long you were away. Maybe you can talk to that and just, fill in what maybe what you did. But big picture, what was playing on your mind over the course of that period of time that caused you to re-engage with Catholicism?
Yeah. So I guess, I walked away from my faith for about, let me think, because this is quite a while ago, for roughly about 7 years, give or take. So
that's a stretch. And that's so interesting, because that's long enough to have made a clean break.
Yeah. It
like a
certainly
complete
was
clean
long
break.
enough to make a clean break.
Yeah.
I guess once I sort of walked away from it, really got involved with, doing things that other people were doing, really, fitting in and having fun and having a great time doing all of that. There was a part of me that knew that a bunch of the stuff was wrong. And eventually I started crossing boundaries and lines that I knew that even as a child, I was becoming a person that I would despise. So if you were to get me at that point in time and present that version of myself to 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old me, they would have just gone, who are you and why are you doing this? You know this is wrong. You need to step away and walk away from it. So I think there was always that in the back of my mind sort of bugging me a bit. That being said, I always had people around me that believed in Jesus to some sort of extent. So some of my friends were very fervent Protestants, and their experiences with faith sort of reinforced the fact that, okay, there is a good chunk of this that is real, and that if I actually do believe it, then I'm going to have to do something about it. I guess perhaps I was doing a bit of a St. Augustine, and sort of went, look, I'm having a fair bit of fun at the moment. I'll deal with that later. and then eventually it did come full circle for me. It was in my travels in London, as a matter of fact, and thanks to a show regular here, Chris Sudlow and Tamara Martinez, and some very other good strong
people,
Catholics.
Good people, yeah.
Yeah, and actually Emma Cosgrove, I'm not too sure if you've had her on the show.
No.
They helped me get back on track, albeit there was some very passionate interactions, I would say, a bit of yelling and a lot of red wine. But they got the job done,
yeah,
so to speak. One of the first things, like I think Chris very early cottoned on that I was not in a great place. And one of the first things that he did was, "What are you doing this weekend?" And I went, "Oh yeah, nothing much," because footy season was over.
Yep.
He said, "Right, we're going on a train and we're going out to see the priest that runs St. Michael's School in out west of London."
Mm-hmm.
I just went, "Yeah, sure, no worries." And in that, I sort of confronted this priest. Like, he didn't know me from a bar of soap. He didn't really know my history or anything like that. I said, "Look, I've got a whole bunch of problems with what's happened. So I probably should have talked about this a little bit sooner, but my mum got us to move from Adelaide to Melbourne, mostly to be around the traditional Catholic families around there, to hope that we would sort of fit in and everything would go fine."
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, that didn't work out. We moved to Queensland for a year. That didn't work out for various reasons. We ended up back in Adelaide. Along with that, I saw a lot of priests coming in and sort of telling my parents and my mum what to do, and them just doing it. And I was just kind of like, this is in my mind, I was like, this is not a good idea. Like, none of this makes sense. Why are we going to do this?
Yep.
Whilst I understand the motivations now, the practical, I think the finer details, my mum didn't quite disclose to the priest. So, to give them an out, they were probably providing advice that wasn't well suited for that point in time, unknown to them. So I sort of had a bit of a problem with how everyone sort of like saw all these priests as much holier than thou, and that almost what they said was gold. You can't dispute or deny anything that they said. So I did have some problems, because I was like, look, if they're as good as everyone tells me that they are, and they're giving my parents really, really bad advice, where are we going?
Yeah.
How much can I trust these guys?
Yeah.
So I sort of aired that out to this priest, and he just sort of went, "Look, mate, we're human too. We're going to make mistakes, and our interests are the salvation of souls, and based on whatever information people give us, we're going to try and steer people towards that. And you don't have to believe everything that we say," sort of thing. It was like, unless it's, of course, a matter of faith and morals and dogma and doctrine sort of situation, then but we will have the backing of the Catholic Church and the teachings of saints, the Word of God,
yep.
Holy Tradition, things like that. And I just sort of went, "Yeah, okay, no worries. Thanks for that, Father." Went back, caught up with Chris, and then we went to the pub for a few beers, which was great. That was always up my alley. I
think sometimes those can be the most powerful conversations. The unloose, well, what's the word? Just the authentic, raw, little bit of alcoholic lubricant with a confidant who you will spill everything to, and who is worth spilling everything to. And it sounds like you were blessed to have a few of those in your life, as I have been definitely. As well. Yeah.
Yeah. So, that was sort of my story of walking away from the faith. I think the one thing that there was that always that anchor, that seed, I guess, for lack of a better term, that was just like, God is real, and if you do believe that, then there's some inevitable consequences, and the way that you live and act out your life, and what's the right way to go about it. And to me, the traditional Catholic way of life, and especially TLM, is a great representation and the most authentic thing that you can probably experience on this planet, bar experiencing a miracle firsthand, like Fatima, or the miracle of Lanciano, where the Eucharist actually turned into the flesh of our Lord. So it's the closest thing that you're going to get. And from what I hear, angels are also a little bit envious that we've got that. So
wow.
Something that I do mean to ask them if I get to the pearly gates.
A few things I want to touch on based on that. How do you know Chris and Tam?
Through Emma Cosgrove, I think would probably be the best answer, because I rocked up to London at the time that she was there, and basically rocked up to Mass, saw these guys, went out for some beers, got along with them fine. Chris and I had some very similar experiences. He told me that he was in the British Army version of the reserves. So we obviously had a lot of experiences that we could draw on, and a lot in common on that front.
Okay. What took you to London?
I'm going to throw Victoria Langeth under the bus on this one. She was just like, I was in contact with her. I can't exactly remember how, but I was in contact with her, and she was just telling me about all these great things that she was doing over in Europe and the UK. At the time, I was just finishing university, and around then I got a job. Unfortunately for me, the global financial crisis hit, and jobs in sport and recreation are quite often the first to go, simply because it's a recreational type industry, and when people's budgets are squeezed, that's the first thing to go. So that unfortunately didn't pan out for me, and I had some money saved up, and I thought, you know what, stuff it. I'm just going to go over there, and I'm just going to have a great time. I don't know what's going to happen, but let's do it. So I packed up all my stuff. I left my car and all my things at my auntie and uncle's house, and jumped on a plane and went to London. And funnily enough, the minute I got off the plane in London, that's when one of my old mates from my primary school messaged me and said, get to this oval when you can. We've got you lined up to play a game of AFL. So I was literally off the plane, jet lagged, and played a game of footy.
How good is that? How'd you pull up?
Not great. I think I played an all right game. But then straight after that, they took me out on a boat cruise, and there was just plenty of beer and other antics going on.
Yeah, gotcha. So that'd be churny.
I think there was just one point, probably at about 8 or 9, where I was just almost falling asleep standing up, sort of thing.
Gotcha.
Because I was pretty spent.
Yep. And then a bigger picture issue you touched on that I'd really like to discuss further with you is that conflict you felt between what you saw in tradition, which is it conflicts enormously with what you see and experience out in what we would call the world. And tradition is small, especially back in those days. Tradition would have been smaller and would have had a far smaller footprint than what it has today. And confronting issues like the ones you identified in terms of the clout a priest has in tradition is so anathema to the ideas that are circulating in wider society. You just look at some of the issues that are floating around in society to do with the clergy over the past 5-10 years. And look, there have been problems that have caused those issues. But if you contrast them and you go, one is based on a belief in God, a belief in Jesus Christ, a belief in the Catholic Church, and a belief in the unadulterated passing on of certain truths. And then the other, the far bigger one, rejects the first premise. And that gives you something absolutely, completely different. So many people, when they go out and they, let's say, smell the roses and get the candy, go out into the world, they really, really struggle coming back because the two are irreconcilable. They are mutually exclusive, really.
They are. You can attempt to do what I did and try and make them work, but there's a point you'll reach if you try to do that. You'll reach a point where you've just got to choose one or the other.
Yeah, and let's clarify something, because I think this is something you may be able to comment on and relate to. When you say, irreconcilable, you're not talking about having acquaintances and close friends who are not of the faith. I think that's terrific, beautiful, and apostolic, so long as you are actually making it apostolic. You don't put up the blinders and shun everything that comes from outside your small little church community, because I think that's a very un-Catholic attitude in terms of we're commanded to go out and be apostolic and evangelize. But I think what I'm getting at is more compromising, living two separate lives. And that is something that I think a lot of people experience. I've probably experienced that, Monday to Friday is different to Sunday, without
definitely
going into too much detail.
Of course. I mean, you've been to university, mate. You've been
Had a
around,
good time.
You've been on the campuses.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. But there comes a point where, the chip's going to come down and you're just going to have to go all in on which hand you want to go all in on. It's completely up to you. Ultimately, at the end of the day, if you believe in God and you believe that he's revealed himself through his son, Jesus Christ, to the world, and all those sorts of things, there's inevitable flow-on effects to that belief. It has to shift your perspective. And if you actually believe in these things, you need to act as though you do believe in them. Otherwise, you're living a somewhat duplicitous life, and at some point, it's probably going to do your mental health some sort of damage.
Yeah, and
to be honest,
we smile, but it's true.
That's right.
So, I guess where the next step I wanted to take that is in terms of a lot of people see, and I discuss this with a lot of other people. The way they perceive Catholicism is a system of rules and regulations and commands, and the quality of your life is based on how well you conform to those dictates. And to me, that's such an archaic and just inaccurate perception of Catholicism, because Catholicism is meant to be happy, beautiful, and that comes as a result of the happiness you experience from conforming with truth. In the times that you went, let's call them through the dark time, through the struggle, where was there fulfillment? Was it the lack of fulfillment that caused you to come back?
There was very much a.
That wasn't a leading question at all. What are your experiences on that?
Yeah, so you're right. Whilst you have a bunch of fun and all that sort of stuff, there's a certain part of you, and if you're being honest with yourself, that you'll find that you're not being fulfilled in a very non-materialistic way. So what I mean by that is, and I can just point to this anecdotally, for example, some of the most rich and powerful people on the planet are inherently unhappy for one reason or another. But there is no reason if you were a materialist and you desired all of these things, why is it that these people are so unhappy? So it's not like, the world is trying to sell you this lifestyle, I guess, and you can have it all, and you shouldn't feel guilty for wanting to have it all. But there is a point where things won't work out, and there's a point where things start to get a little bit broken, not only within great economic system or anything like that, but just inherently within yourself. There's a certain sort of emptiness that I certainly felt that I was not entirely sure how to fill. All I knew was that I wouldn't be able to fill it doing what I currently was doing. So something had to change, and I really had to sort of stump up and, I guess, put my money where my mouth was, and get on with it.
Okay. And the flip side to that is, did an invigorated return to Catholicism give you happiness? Because some people go off, they experience dark nights of the soul, and they can tend to describe their return to Catholicism as almost a prodigal son returning to maybe a dictatorial father that's going, I told you so. So I left the error of my ways and I dragged my sorry self back to the person who was right all along, as opposed to going, I left this behind me. I returned and I was embraced with, I guess that the true story of the prodigal son, where there was a feast and they actually experienced real joy.
Yeah.
Does your Catholicism make you happy? That's my question.
Yeah, it does. Oh, sorry. Yes, my Catholicism definitely makes me happy.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a prodigal son moment where, bang, I was all of a sudden happy and the feast was on, or anything like that. I think when you said that, sort of dragged myself back in the door feeling a bit sorry and limp and lame, I think that was probably a little bit more accurate. Yeah. But I knew that in my faith, I'd find truth and some sort of intrinsic satisfaction. And I knew that it wouldn't be something that just came to me instantly. This was not like, your faith isn't like a cup of Nesquik. You don't just put some Nesquik in there, pour the milk in, and you get your delicious drink, right?
Yeah.
It's just not how it works. It might work for some people, but I'd say that they're the exception, not the rule. And I'm really happy that they've had those experiences, because I do think that it provides, and I think God gives the people that need those experiences the sort of strength and motivation to stick to the faith, which is fantastic. But for those that don't experience that, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not for you. You need to put work into it. You need to really sort of mortify yourself, not only your physical self, but psychologically as well, and then also spiritually. So, there's a certain sort of cross section there where all of those things start to come together. And until you accept the facts that these things are factual, and that and once you motivate yourself to actually do something about it, I would say that the more you get into it and the more you read up on great stories of great saints, the history of the church, how the church actually works in terms of how the dogmas come about, why we practice our faith, the way we practice our faith, how that links into sacred scripture, how that links into sacred tradition, and the role that the magisterium needs to play within that, things start to make sense. And then once you start acting out your life in the way that Christ wants you to act out your life, the happiness will start to flow from within. You'll find yourself more content, more at ease, more at peace, and actually be able to prioritize your life accordingly. So, for example, as Catholics, we are called to save our souls and the souls of others. What does that mean? That means that we really need to tidy up our own bedroom, as Jordan Peterson would say, before we go out and do anything. As much as we try, we are all sinners, and thank God that Christ instituted the sacrament of confession. Otherwise, I don't know. I don't know what things would look like otherwise. To anyone that's listening or watching, my advice to you is just stick at it and really invest yourself into it. And I think that's one of the great things about the Catholic faith is it's free. Obviously, I'm not saying that people shouldn't financially contribute to their local parish or anything like that. Definitely not. But if you want to get into Catholicism and you just don't know whether it's for you or not for you, whatever the case may be, hey, guess what? If you walk in through the door, there's not someone there with a door charge service going, where's your ticket? It costs $50 entry. That's not going to happen. But that being said, it's not like just rocking up and just doing the things. You're just going to instantly find happiness or contentment within that. You're going to have to work at it and really knuckle down, as pretty much all the great saints throughout history have shown us.
That is so interesting what you just said, because it brings to mind a comment that somebody recently made to me in terms of how we are conditioned to think, and that they were talking about in the context of giving up a smartphone. They were sick of social media, and they'd thrown it away, and they got a different phone, I think, which gave them access to emails, but not, they couldn't access Facebook, the gram, anything else. And they said they were expecting instantaneous gratification, because we're as much gratification as everything else gives us instantly, everything in wider society is designed to hit you instantaneously. And that's the addiction. That's the thing that sort of sucks you in and chews you up. And a lot of the time doesn't spit you out, which is the real struggle. But you turn away from those things and you make that conscientious decision to try and fight back or win or work on yourself and improve yourself. And they said, it's so funny because we've been conditioned to expect instantaneous results in the opposite. And so you just don't get those. And Catholicism, especially those things worth cherishing and preserving, are so different. It's a completely different game. It's quiet as opposed to loud. It's calm as opposed to chaotic. It's long-term as opposed to short-term. And so if you're carrying and relying on those, loud short-term gratification, ironically, those things actually don't give you happiness, which is what I think people find.
You've definitely nailed it on the head there. We are conditioned for this instant gratification, and I think the world at large is quite good at presenting that as an option. And there is a certain amount of gratification that you can instantly get from the world and all those sorts of things. So I think that in a certain sort of sense, it's successful in its marketing and it's successful in its product delivery, for lack of a better way of putting it. But the fine print is you'll still feel a certain sort of emptiness within you. And I think, greater to the conversation is the de-Christianization of the West. So, and I think probably a good chunk of people have talked about it within all the Catholic communities. It's certainly something, broadly speaking, that's a topic. Obviously, there's more specific sort of causes and topics within that, but I do see the de-Christianization of the West as certainly a cultural shift, and it has left the world and its population feeling somewhat empty. And I theorize, and I have absolutely no academic studies or anything to back this comment, so please take it with a huge grain of salt, but I theorize that with the de-Christianization of the West and this lack of fulfillment, we have seen the rise of social justice warrior types, simply because there is this offer of, well, you're not going to get all of your material gratification, but here's a cause
religion
that you can invest yourself in. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's sort of this like pseudo religion. And from it, you can derive self-fulfillment. And, and with the de-Christianization of the West, people are looking for fulfillment and they're looking in other places for it. And some people found it within these movements. Some people have found it in some other more nefarious type things like drugs, which is just absolutely destroying, the family unit and society at large, and all sorts of other things as well. So, I think that's absolutely correct in terms of what you're saying about Catholicism. I don't know about your chaotic comment there. I think there's a good consensus that the Catholic Church, as it stands at this point in time of recording, is in quite the chaotic situation.
Look, hard to argue with that.
But I guess what you're getting at there, though, is we're not called to chaos. We're called to calmness and to to be content within ourselves. God has a plan for each and every individual on this planet. The question is, do you want to play ball with him or not? If you don't want to play ball with him, fine, leave the field. Go play another game. But at the end of the day, you might find yourself coming back to the field that you know and to be true. And if you do, you're not just going to instantly win the game, so to speak. You're going to have to work at it. You're going to have to put a few pre-seasons in it.
Mm-hmm. Really, really interesting comments. To tie this all up, can you tell me a little bit about Luke now? Yeah, your circumstances, your situation, and contrast that with maybe the previous versions of yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so the family that I grew up in was, the best way that I'll put it is, I saw what I didn't want to have for my family. And right now, I'm incredibly happily married to my lovely wife, Amanda. We have just had the arrival of our second child, Emilise.
Congratulations.
Which is, thank you, mate. And we've also got our first child, John, whom both I love very dearly. And, we're all working on our faith together in so much as we can. Just doing the basics right, admittedly is a bit of a struggle, so for example, and I know this is not the best of examples, but I struggle with my daily rosary, and that's something that I'm currently working on. I do find that whenever I am praying the rosary regularly, things in my life tend to slow down and to become more calm, and I'm able to actually make decisions as a husband, and even at work and other areas of my life much more effectively. So I don't necessarily know whether that's a purely physical byproduct. I know that there's obviously some supernatural gifts that you get from saying the rosary, but there's some bizarre physical side effects that I've certainly noticed that I have no reason to, like, I can't explain it. But right now, very happily married, with 2 wonderful kids, hoping to have more, of course, God willing. We're just trying to get on with life and, try and bring about Christ the King's reign here on earth in so much as we can with the admittedly hostile environment that we're operating in. And we just want to, do our part, I guess, where we can.
Terrific. Well, Luke, it's been phenomenal hearing your story. It's such an interesting story that so many people can learn so much from. But I think in addition to that, kind of relate to, and I really appreciate you sharing the difficulties you had and your thought processes going through it, because as we've discussed, you and I are 2 people amongst millions who probably have a lot in common in that, we're human, we're mortal. So I really appreciate you taking the time to share those thoughts and those experiences with me. And I really hope, I have no doubt that the listeners will get an awful lot from it. And mate, good luck in your game of touch. Carve up.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks, mate.
Where do you play?
I think
in a position, sort of, you a quickie, or you got a good cutout pass? Yeah.
In touch. I try and get in amongst the action, to be honest. Touch is not a game that I touch is not a game that I'm I've got a great technical aptitude for. I'm definitely guided by some other more experienced people, but I like to think I'm relatively quick off my feet. But wasn't as quick as I was 7 years ago. That much is for sure.
Terrific. Well, all the best. Hope you carve up. And thank you so much for taking the time to join me in the lounge room today.
Thank you very much, Tom. God bless.
Thanks. Luke is somebody who believes that no matter how hard your life and the practices of your Catholicism gets, it is always worth sticking to it, and you don't know where it will lead you or the benefit that it will give you. Luke, thanks again.
No worries.